Hello and welcome to this training video on law enforcement crisis intervention teams. I'm Mark Brennan, Project Director for Continuing Education Television at the Missouri Institute of Mental Health in St. Louis, Missouri. And with me today is a panel of individuals who are going to be talking about law enforcement crisis intervention teams. I'd like to introduce the panel to you now. To my immediate left is Kevin Haggerty, who is a consumer panelist and has been a part of the CIT project since 1999. He is also a co-facilitator and trainer and a research assistant. To his left is Guyla Stidman, who has been executive director for the National Alliance for Mentally Ill of Greater Kansas City since 1995. She has previously worked for the Department of Mental Health for over 28 years. To her left is Dr. Dick Gregory, who is associate professor of psychiatry at the University of Missouri, Kansas City. He is also chief executive officer at Western Missouri Mental Health Center in Kansas City. To his left is Danielle Robbins, who is associate director of Resource Development Institute. She was appointed clinical instructor at the University of Missouri Kansas City School of Medicine, Department of Psychiatry in 2005. She has extensive experience in program evaluation and research in the public sector, serving high-risk populations. To her left is Dr. Rob Hornstra, who is medical director at Western Missouri Mental Health Center. He's also associate dean of the School of Medicine, University of Missouri, Kansas City. That's been quite a mouthful to introduce all you guys. I'm glad that you're here and wanted to have a conversation with you about the important work that you're doing with police, peace officers in your community with respect to crisis intervention teams. I think the first place for us to start would be for one or some of you to identify what a crisis intervention team is.
Tyler?
Crisis intervention team is, the crisis intervention program actually is a law enforcement based program. It does involve 40 hours of training for the law enforcement officer, but even more importantly, it is about collaboration with the mental health community, consumers and families, as well as law enforcement.
So law enforcement and the mental health folks in your community have banded together to provide emergency care and treatment?
Exactly.
And how long has that been happening?
We started in 1999 with Lee Summit, I believe is where we began. And we've been, now we're expanded to 15 different police departments and sheriff's departments in the metropolitan Kansas City area.
That's quite a large number.
Yes. We have close to now about 234, I believe, trained officers on site within the metropolitan area. They do somewhere around 2,000 to 3,000 calls a year. There are more officers that are trained than that, but as they graduate and get promoted, then they go off of the patrol.
Sure.
So we have over probably 500 people trained, but at any given day, there's 230 some odd officers.
Well, why don't you talk to me about how all this got started? What was the impetus for the collaboration?
Well, one of the things that we're very proud of with this program is the reason that it did get started in the metropolitan area is because we saw a need. The stakeholders saw the need rather than an incident. And that is exactly how it got started, with law enforcement and NAMI met and pulled together 43 different stakeholders that have been meeting every month since 1999 to pull this program together.
Okay. Part of the problem that CIT addressed was the lack of connectivity between services, our consumers, and police officers. So prior to CIT, there was limited connectivity. That lack of connectivity led often to people being incarcerated or not properly dealt with in an emergency situation. This was not good for our community, our consumers, or for the police. And oftentimes providers were always brought in at the very last moment, if at all. We were aware of a model, a best practice model in Memphis, Tennessee that had been going on for a number of years. And at the interest of not so much providers, not so much consumers or family members, but quite honestly, at the interest of police, came seeking us out to see if we would be interested in attending and getting trained in the Memphis model.
Oh, gosh.
And that is my recall of how we kind of started.
Exactly.
And so there was already, it seems like in the front end, buy-in from the police department, other concerned folks.
And Mark, that's key. That we've made a number of attempts in the provider community or in the consumer community to reach out, but with little success. And one of the underpinnings of the success today is that this is truly police-driven, police-led, and police-motivated.
And this is also a voluntary program also.
Okay.
I think it's real important to notice that the police officers nobody gets paid extra to be a CIT officer.
Oh, I see. Okay.
And I think it also is important to notice that with all the budget cuts happening in Missouri, especially in the Department of Mental Health and in different areas, this voluntary program doesn't cost anything for the taxpayer.
Sure.
This is basically a free run program where people volunteer to run or participate in it.
So it's a win-win situation, it sounds like. You've got the police and other concerned agencies involved, as well as NAMI. It sounds like it's a free program, and people are motivated to participate in this. What do you see as the outcome of the program? Could you talk to us about outcomes?
We were lucky that the council, which is the Mid-America CIT Council, which consists of providers and other mental health professionals, police officers, policymakers, and consumers, they recognized early on the need for evaluation. And so for the past 4 years, we've been evaluating the CIT program in the Kansas City area. As Dr. Gregory was stating, since 2001, the officers have responded to 2,181 crisis calls. The persons they're coming into contact with are severely mentally ill. They're also physically ill. They have cardiovascular problems. They have diabetes. They're also using substances at the scene. So these officers are dealing with a very sick population. So when the officer comes into contact with a consumer, there are a number of different responses that he or she can use. He can make a referral to a mobile crisis team, have the team come out on the site and deal with the situation there. The officer can transport to a psychiatric receiving facility such as Western Missouri Mental Health Center for an immediate psychiatric evaluation. The officer is also trained in dealing with the situation, resolving the situation on the scene, which may mean in some cases just transporting the consumer to pick up their medications or do whatever is necessary to get them back engaged in services. So overall, the overall outcomes of the program are we have a very low arrest rate, very few consumers are taken to jail. Consumers are engaged in treatment now. We identify them early so that they can be engaged in treatment and hopefully not come into contact with law enforcement in the future.
An interesting thing along those lines in terms of the data, we've found that over 50% of the people coming in contact with a CIT officer have not been in mental health services before. And so it's a way of really initial first response. And usually with these disorders, it's best to respond early, early on whenever the problems begin to exist.
That's almost like a frontline intervention before mental health even gets involved.
Strikingly so. Strikingly so. I was kind of surprised that it was just sort of for known persons that had psychiatric disabilities. But we're finding out really much to the benefit of the community is that it's an early identification system and a way to get people into treatment that would have not maybe otherwise gotten care and treatment.
Dr. Armstrong, you were going to make a comment.
I think another major outcome for law enforcement and for our community is that there's just a real respect and understanding of mental illness and our consumers that hasn't been there before. I don't see reports anymore that say, I found a mental on the corner of such and such street. There's just an understanding that these are illnesses that need to be treated.
We're seeing a real cultural change, not only in our consumers and providers, but in the police departments themselves, where they really are working as a team, a colleague, and as a coalition.
I was going to comment, it sounds like the folks in the front end are a little more sophisticated now as a result of the training. Could you talk to us about what's involved in the training? It sounds like there might be some assessment skills that are taught, or maybe some other kinds
I
of
think
skills?
Gala and Kevin.
One of the things that I think that is very, very important, and Kevin and I both have noticed this, that the officers are more comfortable because as part of the training, we always have consumers there for the whole 40 hours. So they're able to interact. What you know is what you're more comfortable with.
Sure.
And so putting a face to mental illness helps. They're even asking for more of that. In one of the evaluations was, what would you change? And is, we want more time with families and consumers.
We don't just grab any officer for this program either.
Exactly.
Oh, okay. So there's a
Say more
interview
about that.
process.
Well, they self-select in a way. They volunteer to be involved, but then they have to be interviewed and selected to be a part of the program.
Oh, okay.
And it's during the class, as part of the consumer panel that I'm involved with, and with 4 other consumers, they get a chance to ask questions about the illness or about our personal stories, of which we tell them. So they get a chance then to open up
Sure.
in a way that they won't be able to when they're responding to a call, when they're on the police force, because they won't be able to take the person's side and say, by the way, is this what a hallucination is? Or
Sure.
by the way, is this what you're hearing voices? Is this really what that sounds like, kind of thing? They can ask those type of questions during the training. We can kind of open up their minds towards seeing somebody who has a mental illness.
So they get real life
and
examples.
respond to them as a real life person.
There are standard modules that are involved in the 40-hour training. What really comes to mind is standard models on pharmacology. What are the psychotropic medications that this population may be using or might need? What are the diagnostic categories? What is the difference between diagnosis of schizophrenia and depression? That'll be another significant model. I think there's there's a model on non-lethal interventions and how to avoid.
And that's part of it with the training modules. Law enforcement participates in the training, and they facilitate the training. This is not families and consumers that are coming in there saying, you're doing this wrong and you need to do this, you need to do that. They're there with us as a united front and united teaching modules, to where we know exactly what needs to happen and interact with them. Role playing. That is the day that things start bonding
Sure.
with the officers, because they hate it. They hate the role playing, but once they get involved and they're actually interacting during that and putting the tools to use. The other important thing is that there is the face-to-face with community providers. If you happen to be in a particular zone in KCPD, you know who your crisis worker is at the mental health provider facility.
Okay.
And they trade numbers, and there is that face-to-face kind of contact. Same thing happens with the consumers and with the family. Everyone becomes aware of what each of the stakeholder groups that have to face in coping with mental illness.
So it's not only an intervention program, it's also about handling case referral and other types of services.
What do I do on a Sunday morning at 1 o'clock
Sure.
when there is nothing else open, and I have someone that my choices are either get a hold of a mental health provider or take them to jail for their own safety?
Sure.
This takes care of that problem. There's no doubt as to who they get a hold of.
Training is ongoing throughout the year.
Okay.
There can be as many as 12 to 20 training sessions within a year, and each training session has around 30 officers that are involved.
Okay.
Each one of the sessions are evaluated for its effectiveness, and at the end of each session, there are modifications that are made for the next training session based upon the observations and the findings of the last training. So it's very structured, it's ingrained, and there's a process that's ongoing and self-sustaining. The people who train, if they're not a police officer, family member, or consumer, they're generally an expert in their field, such as psychopharmacology or psychiatry. And these folks donate their time in kind without charge to the program. And so we have a ready body of trainers that are repeating each and every session.
Now, has this been taken outside of the Kansas City area?
Yes.
That was what I was, when you were talking about it being a very structured curriculum, it is. But it is also a curriculum that is very flexible. Now, I know that that sounds like an oxymoron there, but it's so flexible that you can take it from a rural perspective to a urban perspective and still have the fidelity of the model.
Sure.
And it has gone to 4 other states that we have implemented, or they're beginning in the implementation process, that we've done the training with some of the officers. Then the state of Georgia has adopted our curriculum as being the curriculum that every law enforcement agency in the state of Georgia must attain. So that's the program is very flexible while still being very true to the fidelity of the program.
So what are the other states besides Georgia that are involved, do you know?
Colorado, Kansas,
Missouri and
Arkansas, Missouri,
Mhm.
and then of course we recently, just last week, some of the panelists here attended the first national CIT program
Okay.
that has ever been held in the country, and there were over 40 states that either had CIT or were interested in bringing CIT to their city or to their state. So
After a few years of training officers, they were requesting more training. They had a need for additional advanced training. So in the past year and a half or so, we've developed an advanced training course, which is a 24-hour course, which is structured around the needs identified by the officers. For instance, there was a need for a lot more information on autism, so there's a 3-hour autism course. And so those are ongoing also. So we've adapted as the officers request more information.
So that's like continuing education.
Yeah,
Exactly.
Revolving around.
and they're coming and saying, this is what we need, this
I'm
is
sure.
what we're running in, and we just provide them with the tools.
So what's the next step for your program, and nationally how you might be involved in that effort?
Well, I think on a local basis is we want to make ourselves available to other municipalities and other jurisdictions. That's our first local kind of goal.
Okay.
Right now we have over 15 sites that we've been working with. We would love to double that and triple that as time goes on. So I think on a local basis, that's one of our first goals,
Yes.
is to perpetuate this model led by police locally. Then what are some of the other?
Well, there are some results of this effort that need to be addressed, because we are finding people with mental illness and difficulties earlier than we would have found them before. We are having more new people that are entering service in the mental health system, and so it is putting a strain on the system in our area, and this is also a phenomenon that's been found in other places that have instituted this program, that we're actually using mental health resources instead of jails.
Sure.
For the treatment of these people.
That's wonderful.
And so you need more treatment resources.
And that would probably be a whole nother topic for another time.
It would.
I think it's real important for the audience out here to know about the law enforcement crisis intervention teams. Please, when you watch this video, check out the resource information that we're going to put on the addendum to the training material. And if you review the key concepts and the glossary of terms, you won't have any problem passing your test. I thank you and thank the panel.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.